You might think about communication and the purpose of why do we communicate? And most of the time, it is to get something. We want something, we need something, we need to persuade, we need to move people's beliefs from one to the other. But ultimately, language is power, language is survival. And the way that we manipulate language is truly our power. But in order to do that well, we need to understand the tools that help us to manipulate language in order to get what we want or to persuade. And we're thinking specifically of the rhetorical appeals. So, what is rhetoric? Rhetoric is a fancy way of saying, how do we manipulate language to get what we want? And when we think about rhetoric, really it is about persuasion. Most of the time, right? We're not really looking to instruct people, we're looking to persuade. And when we think about rhetoric, we think about this triangle, often called the rhetorical triangle. Purpose is at the top. That is ultimately why are we doing this? Message is the what. It's also what the writer wants, and it's the main point. Author or speaker and audience. And the three of those work together around what the writer wants or the message. And then we think about the manipulation of language to achieve a purpose. And we're going to be analyzing this all year. And if we think about the ways in which we can achieve our purpose, we need to be able to understand the three types of rhetorical appeals. So let's get into that now. We have ethos, pathos or pathos, and logos. I have included a short video in your slides, but I just want to kind of work through the three of these in order for you to understand. So please take notes in your notebook or on a piece of paper so that you can remember more clearly what we talked about today. Ethos is the credibility part. What does it mean to be credible? Well, we want to believe a person, right? We tend to believe a person more when they have a role or a function or a job, right? So, we believe Obama, he was the president. And we believe Drake when he talks about what he is the expert in, right, in music. So it really depends on the topic, it depends on the purpose, and it depends on the message as to how that ethos shapes up, right? It depends also on who the speaker is. So ultimately, you can see at the bottom here, ethos has a through line to speaker. And we always want to think, okay, what is the speaker's role? How are they credible? Is it a job that they have, right? How are they using themselves to build empathy? And we'll get into that in a minute. When we speak or when we debate, ethos is also, how do you stand? How do you have eye contact? How do you carry yourself? All that is part of your presentation. It's part of how you convince. It could even be the tone or the way that you use your hands, that type of thing. When we think about pathos or pathos, that is all about emotion. So every time I think pathos, I'm thinking, or pathos, path to the heart. Path to the heart is pathos or pathos. Let's just go with pathos. Path to the heart is pathos. It is the emotional connection. That's why the audience is right underneath pathos right here, because it is a relationship builder with the audience. Ultimately, a lot of people are persuaded by an emotional connection or an emotional story or feeling a certain type of way and attaching that meaning making to a feeling. Therefore, they might do something or believe something different. And then to the right, we have logos. I always think of logos along with logic, the LOG, and that is the reasoning. And ultimately, that gets to the message or the main point and what the writer or speaker wants. This is a really helpful chart and thinking about the three, logos often deals with data, numbers, surveys, graphs, charts, facts, figures, research, right? Statistics, but also the expert opinion. So if you're going to debate on climate change, you want to have some data. You want to have some quotes from experts. If you're going to report out on climate change, you may want to compare different data points from 20 years ago, 10 years ago, today, so you can show that impact over time. When I think about ethos, right, let's go back to that for a second. It is related to the speaker because it's what role that person has. It's the reputation of the speaker, the authority. Remember, Obama's authority is like in one area or one topic or one purpose, and Drake's authority is in an entirely different. They both carry ethos in relation to whatever topics they're speaking on. But ethos also creates a similarity or an empathy, right? It's if we understand that the person speaking or the person debating can create a connection with someone and say, hey, you know, I've been there. I understand. I know what it feels like to do this, or this. And politicians do that a lot, right? I'm from this neighborhood. I understand what your challenges are. Obama did this pretty well because he would create ethos in a way of creating similarity and empathy by acting like he's a regular guy, right? And just talking to people, and it's how he spoke and the words that he chose were like regular everyday words. He wasn't speaking like he was a professor in college. And that's all part of ethos as well, with the objective of creating that similarity. Pathos is interesting because you get into the stories, the anecdotes, sensory detail. Metaphor is huge. Really think about how you can use metaphor to create pictures, like mental images, also to drive home really like the impact. So like impact statements, the river of grief or the ocean of love, right? You just get a different sense through that mental image. And then oftentimes speakers will say, especially politicians, the vision, right? So Dr. King, I have a dream. So that's all part of pathos, sharing that vision with the audience. These three work together. They are interdependent. It's not just that one is by itself. So I really want you to pause when you see a data point, when you hear a story, and I want you to examine how a speaker or a writer develops the pathos, the emotional connection. And how does that relate back to ethos, right? Because ultimately that pathos, the emotional connection, helps the writer or the speaker create that similarity or empathy with the audience. Here it is in another picture form. And we'll just go here and stop with that. So that is ethos, pathos, and logos in a nutshell. And I hope you learned a little bit more about how not only we use words to manipulate, but the three different avenues we can pull together and analyze as we read and listen, but also practice in debate.